The first thing Philippa Troy felt was his hand. Not rough, not gentle, certain. It closed around her wrist in the dark, like he had always known exactly where she would be. Her back hit the cold marble wall before her mind could catch up. Music thundered beyond the velvet doors. Bodies moved. Glass shattered somewhere. Laughter followed, careless and wealthy. Neon pulsed blue, then violet, then gold. But here, in this corridor, it was quiet, too quiet. Baek Choi-hun stood impossibly close. Heat, power, expensive cologne that didn't announce itself, only settled. Danger the way oxygen is dangerous, invisible, essential, capable of feeding fire. His tie hung loose, shirt open at the throat. Discipline, apparently, bored him. His eyes moved over her face slowly. Not hungry, worse than hungry. Studying, memorizing, owning reactions she hadn't yet had time to suppress. Philippa tried to pull her hand away. He didn't tighten his grip. He just didn't release her. She had survived force before. Force she knew how to fight. But this was not force. This was patience. And patience from a man like this was infinitely more dangerous. Her pulse betrayed her, a treacherous spike, transmitting directly into his fingers like her body was confessing without her permission. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. Once, her breath caught. "There," he murmured. Lower than a whisper, the kind of sound that only existed in this specific proximity, between two people standing too close and pretending otherwise. That's the honest part of you. She became aware of everything at once. The warmth trapped between their bodies, his chest almost touching hers. The terrifying patience of a man who had arranged his entire evening around this single moment. He leaned closer, so close she could feel his breath near her mouth. Not a kiss. The architecture of a kiss, the space where one would exist if either of them crossed the last remaining distance. "Are you afraid?" he asked. She met his eyes, dark brown, almost black, utterly calm. "No," she whispered. His lips curved slowly. Then he released her wrist, only to slide his hand to her waist. Firm, claiming, a statement, not a question. His voice dropped into something that wasn't quite sound anymore. More like gravity. "You won't be able to handle me." Her breath hitched, because the worst part was, she wasn't sure she wanted to. If this story already has you gripped, hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started, and you will want to be here for every chapter. 3 months before the corridor, Incheon International Airport received Philippa Troy at 6:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in February, and Seoul greeted her with gray skies and a wind that cut through her coat like it had questions. She was 31 years old, trauma nurse, 8 years of emergency department experience, 2 hospital commendations, 1 restraining order renewed twice, and a therapist named Dr. Yoon Ji-hae who had agreed to continue their sessions from Seoul because Philippa had said, very quietly during their 3rd appointment, "If I don't leave the country, I think I'll stop being able to leave the apartment." Dr. Yoon had written the referral letter herself. Philippa cleared customs with the expressionless efficiency of someone who had learned to perform normalcy so consistently it had become its own kind of armor. Collected her bags, found the car. Watched Seoul appear through the window in layers, gray highway, then density, then the organized chaos of a city that had been rebuilt from devastation and decided, in the rebuilding, to go very, very large. She pressed her forehead briefly against the cold glass. "You're here," she told herself. "This counts." Severance Hallyu Medical Center was one of the most prestigious hospitals in Seoul. It was also, as Philippa would eventually discover, substantially owned by a conglomerate called BH Group. She learned this from a colleague, a sharp-tongued, warm-hearted Korean-American nurse named Sung Ji-ah, who had designated herself Philippa's unofficial orientation guide approximately 45 minutes after her first shift. BH Group owns about 30% of this hospital's parent organization, Ji-ah said one evening over instant ramen at midnight. Which means eventually you will encounter the CEO. Most staff never actually see him. He does late-night inspections, maybe 4 times a year, and when he does, the entire administrative floor acts like the king is visiting. Philippa looked up. What's he like? Ji-ah considered this carefully. Technically, impressive. Mid-30s. built BH Group from his father's mid-sized company into one of the top 5 medical investment conglomerates in Asia in under 10 years. A pause. He never stops wanting things once he starts. Staff say he doesn't know how to leave a problem alone until he's taken it completely apart. And untechnically? Jia looked at her. He's the kind of man you notice once, she said, and spend a very long time trying to stop noticing. Philippa returned to her ramen. Not interested, she said. Jia smiled into her cup. That's what I said. The panic disorder had developed 18 months ago. There had been a version of Philippa Troy who moved through crowded emergency departments without flinching, who managed 12-hour trauma shifts on coffee and competence, who believed, sincerely, that she was the kind of woman who didn't need saving because she had always been the one doing the saving. Then she met Marcus Webb. He had been attractive and articulate, with charisma that read initially as attentiveness. He wanted to know every detail of her life, where she was, always. He used the language of protection and devotion, and she had interpreted control as care for 13 months, because the difference, up close, is genuinely not always visible. By the time she understood what she was inside, she had lost 30 pounds, quit 2 jobs, and stopped calling her mother. She left on a Thursday afternoon while he was at work. She drove to her mother's house with nothing but her nursing license and a duffel bag, and when her mother opened the door, Philippa said, "I need help." Her mother said, "Come inside." That was the beginning of reconstruction. But reconstruction was slow. The panic disorder moved into the space Marcus had occupied. The same claustrophobic pressure, the same sensation of walls closing, generated now internally by a nervous system trained so long to anticipate threat it had forgotten how to stop. She managed it. With therapy, medication, breathing protocols, with the hard-won knowledge of someone who has learned every room she enters before she needs to exit it, she managed it. But some days, managing was all she had. Seoul was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it delivered Baek Choi-hun. He had been called many things. In boardrooms, visionary. In financial columns, ruthless. Meant as a compliment and taken as one. By competitors, dangerous. By the few who knew the full architecture of his life, the public half and the shadow half, something not printed in columns at all. Baek Choi-hun was 36 years old and had spent the entirety of those years being dissatisfied. Not unhappily. This was an important distinction. He was not miserable, not haunted in any cinematic sense. He was simply, constitutionally, relentlessly unsatisfied, with outcomes once achieved, problems once solved, people once understood. His mind moved faster than most of his circumstances, and the result was a man who had conquered nearly everything he'd aimed at and found that conquest, in every case, was simply the beginning of boredom. He had tripled his father's company value in 4 years, not because he needed money, but because the problem had interested him. He had exited 2 long-term relationships, both with women Seoul's social pages called exceptional, not because anything was wrong, but because he had eventually, inevitably, understood them. And understanding removed the tension that kept him engaged. His closest associate, a quiet and surgically loyal man named Park Tae-young, called this the Choi-hun problem. "You need something you cannot master," Tae-young had told him once over expensive whiskey. "Everything you can master, you destroy. Not deliberately. You lose interest so completely that destruction is a side effect." Choi-hun considered this. "You're not wrong," he said. "I know," said Tae-young. "What do you recommend?" "Find something that pushes back, something that refuses to be read." Choi-hun filed this under interesting but impractical. Then he did a quarterly inspection of Severance Hallyu Medical Center at 11 p.m. on a rainy Thursday, and a trauma nurse rounded a corner and walked directly into his chest and looked up at him with large dark eyes and said, without a single degree of deference, "Watch where you're going." Not "I'm so sorry, sir," no flustered recalibration. She assessed the situation, determined he was at least partially responsible, and said so. Then she looked at him one additional second, long enough to register who he was and decide it changed nothing, and walked around him. He stood in the hallway and watched her go. Tae-young, 3 steps behind, said nothing for a moment. Then, "Who is that?" Choi Hun was already pulling out his phone. "I'm going to find out," he said. Her name was Philippa Troy. The file his information chief assembled within 45 minutes told him about Marcus Webb, Atlanta, the restraining order, the violations, the institutional failures, about a transfer arranged through a medical recruitment program, a studio apartment in Mapogu, one close colleague, weekly therapy appointments on Tuesday evenings. He read the file twice. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the quality of his stillness. Heavier, more deliberate, the way air changes when someone has made a decision they haven't yet announced. He felt it the moment he put the file down, that specific insufficiency, that appetite with no edge, the same restlessness that had driven him through boardrooms and cities and people who couldn't hold his attention past understanding. Except now, it pointed at one address in Mapogu. "Surveillance on the apartment building," he said. "Standard protocol. Passive." "And the man in Atlanta?" his information chief asked. "Monitor him. If he moves toward a soul-bound flight, I want to know before he boards." Tae-young watched him carefully. "This is new," he observed. "Yes, you don't know her." "No, and yet?" Choi Hun looked at him. "You told me to find something I couldn't solve." Tae-young was quiet. "I didn't mean for you to surveil it," he said. "I know." Choi Hun stood, straightened his jacket. "I'll introduce myself properly." He was very good at appearing in places where she would be. This was not an accident. The late-night hospital inspections increased. Twice in the first month after their corridor collision, then weekly, then, scheduled with enough variation to avoid obvious pattern, almost constant. He never sought her out overtly. Too intelligent for that. The intelligence was part of the danger, the way he could be everywhere she was without it ever appearing as pursuit, the way he engineered proximity while maintaining the precise deniability of coincidence. She began to notice him on a Wednesday afternoon in late March, exiting the trauma wing after a 12-hour shift, multi-vehicle accident, 2 cardiac events, a conversation with a patient's family that had cost her more than she could measure. Exhausted in the specific way trauma nursing produces, hollowed out, held together by muscle memory, she pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. He was inside. Dark suit, unhurried posture. A phone in one hand he wasn't looking at. He was looking at the doors. He looked at her instead. She stepped in. "Mr. Beck," she said, because she'd learned his name, and pretending otherwise seemed like a social fiction she'd run out of patience for. "Nurse Troy," he replied, his English precise and unhurried, each word given exactly its weight. She faced the doors. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But the elevator was a small space, and he was a large presence. Not physically, but gravitationally, the way certain personalities generate a field you feel, whether or not you're looking at them. By the time the doors opened at her floor, she was aware with uncomfortable clarity that her pulse had been elevated for the last 40 seconds. She stepped out without looking back. Behind her, just low enough to be almost inaudible. "Good night, Nurse Troy." She did not respond. She walked to the break room, stood over the sink, and told herself firmly and explicitly, "You are not doing this." She had come to Seoul for stability, for professional renewal, for the slow, careful work of rebuilding a life that had been dismantled. She was not going to allow some insatiable corporate CEO to occupy any portion of the emotional real estate she had worked so hard to reclaim. Ji-ah appeared with 2 coffees. "You okay?" "You look like you've seen something." "I took the elevator with Baek Choi Hun," Philippa said. Ji-ah looked at her with an expression caught between sympathy and something almost impressed. "Yeah," she said, "that'll do it." The file exchanges began in April. BH Group was reviewing the trauma wing's resource allocation protocols, which required senior nurses to submit monthly operational reports to the CEO's office. In practice, someone from his team collected the reports. In practice, starting in the 3rd week of April, that someone was Choi Hun himself. He appeared at the end of her shift each week, accepted the file, and asked about its contents. Not superficially, he had read the previous reports, and his questions were specific, incisive, the questions of someone who actually understood what they were reading. The cardiac protocol response time improved by 11%, after we reorganized the crash cart placement, she told him one evening in the corridor outside the nursing station. But the bottleneck at Station 3 is still a staffing issue, not a protocol issue. You need another body on the floor between 6 and 10 p.m. The statistics are in the appendix. I read the appendix, he said. Then you already know. I do. A pause. It's been difficult to get administrative approval, because it's expensive. Yes. She looked at him directly. You own 30% of this hospital's parent organization. Something crossed his expression, the barest flicker of amusement, gone before she could catalog it. I'll see what I can do, he said. By Tuesday, the additional staff member was on the schedule. Gia stared at the new roster. How did this happen? I've been requesting this for 2 years. Philippa said nothing, but she thought about his eyes in the corridor, that quality of absolute unhurried attention, and pressed the thought down into the compartment where she was keeping everything else she wasn't allowing herself to feel. Subscribe right now if you're already feeling the tension, because what happens next is the kind of scene that stays with you. It happened on a Tuesday in May at 9:15 in the evening. The hospital had run at maximum capacity all day. A nearby gas leak had brought 43 patients through the emergency department over 8 hours. Philippa had worked through the chaos with the focused dissociation that extreme busyness produces, everything reduced to triage categories and the immediate, manageable present. It was only afterward, in the descending elevator at the end of her shift, that the adrenaline crashed. The doors closed. The elevator began its descent. Then, something went wrong. A lurch, a shudder, a sound not in the expected register. The elevator stopped, not at a floor, just stopped, suspended, lights flickering once, twice, then stabilizing. Philippa stood very still. The walls were close. They had always been close, but in the sudden silence they became present in a way the moving elevator had masked. Ceiling low, space 4 feet by 6 feet, air suddenly thin, insufficient. Her nervous system understood before she did. Her hands began to shake. Protocol, box breathing, 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. She pressed her back against the wall and began. In for 4. The doors opened. She hadn't heard the sound in the corridor, hadn't understood the elevator had simply paused during routine recalibration. The doors opened, and Baek Choi-hoon stood on the other side, his hand on the hold button, his expression changing the moment he saw her face. Nurse Troy, not the boardroom register, something quieter, more focused. I'm fine, she said. She always said this. He stepped in. She didn't tell him not to. Couldn't produce the words. Her breath was coming in short, high increments, the kind that fed the panic loop rather than interrupted it. The doors closed. The elevator resumed. Look at me, he said. I said I'm fine. Philippa. Her name, not her title. The first time, it cut through the gathering static. Look at me. She looked. He placed himself directly in her line of sight, not crowding her, not touching. Just positioned so when her eyes focused, they focused on him. Not the walls, not the ceiling, not the space that felt like a sentence. Breathe with me, he said. 4 counts. Watch my chest. She watched his chest. She followed. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, out, hold. After the second cycle, her hands had stopped shaking. After the 4th, the walls were walls again. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to see it, to refuse, and touched her jaw. Not a grip. A placement. Fingers against the side of her face, with the careful certainty of someone who understood both the purpose and the risk. Tilting her chin up so her eyes, dropping toward the floor the way they did when panic receded and embarrassment moved in, came back to his. There, he said softly. She noticed her hands had moved, that sometime during the 4th or 5th breathing cycle, her fingers had closed around the lapels of his jacket, not pulling, just holding, and she hadn't noticed until now. She didn't let go. He didn't step back. 8 inches between them, his eyes very dark and very still. She was aware of everything, the warmth coming off his skin, the steadiness of his breathing, his thumb against her cheekbone with a gentleness she hadn't expected, and that undid her completely. You're making it worse, she whispered. His eyes moved over her face. "No," he murmured. "I'm making you feel." She had no answer for that. The elevator gave its small mechanical lurch at the floor, normal, routine, and her body responded with an involuntary forward movement, closing 8 inches to 3, and her mouth brushed his. Barely a kiss, a ghost, a collision more than a choice. She went still. He went still. Neither moved. The doors opened. They stood in the frozen architecture of a moment that was not quite a kiss, but inarguably more than an accident. The lobby, visible beyond the open doors. A passing orderly, not looking up from his phone. The ordinary world continuing with complete indifference. He did not deepen the kiss. He did not move away from it. Absolutely still, her hands in his jacket, his thumb at her cheekbone, both of them breathing in the same small space, the moment stretching, warm and elastic, and capable of snapping into something impossible to put back. Then she released his jacket, stepped back, walked out without looking at him. He stood in the open doors and let her go. She did not sleep that night, lay in her apartment and ran the moment through her mind, in the obsessive, involuntary way her brain processed things it hadn't finished metabolizing. His thumb on her cheekbone, her panic obeying him, the specific, unbearable thing of being steadied by the very person she'd been trying to resist. She thought about Marcus, sat up, went to the bathroom, and looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. He is not Marcus, she told her reflection. He is something else entirely. That does not mean he is safe. Her reflection did not look convinced. She went back to bed. She thought about the thumb on her cheekbone. She did not sleep until 4 a.m. The discovery happened by accident, the way the most important discoveries do. A Friday evening in June, Gia had convinced her to attend a colleague's birthday gathering in Itaewon. Philippa agreed. Low-stakes social exposure, trusted company, all within protocol. She was fine. Fine being its own clinical category. Then a man at the bar caught her eye. Not in a good way. In the way that set off the alarm Marcus had installed in her nervous system. The one that recognized being watched with the quality of someone watching for purpose. She looked away, looked back. Not with anyone. Positioned with a sightline to her table, phone face down. She was being surveilled. Her hands went cold, chest went tight. She texted Gia, man at the bar, blue jacket, far end. Can you check? Gia's response came 90 seconds later. He left the moment I looked at him. Do you want to go? They went. Philippa spent the cab home in controlled, surface-level calm, and it was only after she was inside her apartment with the door locked that she let herself think clearly. The man had been professional. The stillness, the positioning, the immediate exit, trained behaviors. Someone had put a watcher on her, and when she thought about it carefully, with the cold diagnostic clarity she deployed when she needed to think around her own emotions, there was only one person in Seoul with both the resources and the reason. She called in a favor with Gia, who had a contact in BH Group's legal department. 3 days later, she had enough to confirm what she'd suspected. She walked into the hospital at 8 a.m. on a Monday, past the assistant who stood to intercept her, and through the door of the corner office. He was at the desk. She placed a printed sheet in front of him. 3 items. The surveillance company name she'd traced, a screenshot from Gia's contact, and a line she'd written herself in capitals. Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Dr. Yoon, ongoing. He looked at the paper. He looked at her. He did not appear surprised. That was the thing that made her simultaneously most furious and most frightened. The absolute absence of surprise. The composure of a man for whom this revelation confirmed only that she was as intelligent as he'd assessed. How long? She asked. March. Since the corridor collision. Yes. You've had people watching me since March. Her voice was very steady. You know my therapy schedule. You know my address. She stopped. Tell me what else. A pause. I know about Marcus Webb. The name landed like a hand around her throat. She sat down because her legs made a decision. Her pride overrode too slowly. You had no right to that, she said. No, he agreed. I didn't. You had no right to any of this. No. Then why? Because Webb has violated a restraining order twice. His voice changed. dropped below the controlled register into something more direct, heated, less managed. Because he has faced no meaningful consequence. Because you are 20 minutes from this hospital, you live alone, and you have panic attacks in elevators. A pause. Because I wanted to know if you were safe. Philippa looked at him. Protection without consent, she said slowly, is just control wearing a different name. Something moved across his face, rapidly and then gone. You're right, he said. I know I'm right. I know you know. He leaned forward. I'm not arguing the point. She stood. Then stop the surveillance. Remove it. All of it. He held her gaze. Then, very quietly, give me your consent. She stared at him. Give me your consent to keep you safe, and I'll show you everything. Every protocol, every person, every piece of information. Nothing hidden. That is not how consent works. I know that too. He stood. I know what consent is, and I know what you've survived in its absence. I'm not asking you to trust me because I've earned it. I'm telling you I want to earn it. That is different. A beat. You're the only person I've met in a very long time who I cannot predict, and I am not willing to allow someone to harm you while I figure out what that means. She should have left. Should have escalated through proper channels. Done the rational thing every survival protocol she'd built told her to do. Instead, she stood in his office and thought about the elevator, his thumb on her cheekbone, her panic obeying him. I'll think about it, she said. She left. Comment below, are you Team Philippa holding her ground, or are you absolutely gone for Choi Hun already? Tell me in the comments. Now back to this gala. The BH Group Annual Medical Investment Gala was held the first week of July at the Grand Hyatt Seoul. Philippa attended because it was a professional expectation. The Trauma Wing's protocol innovations had been included in a showcase presentation, and her resource allocation report was the case study. She wore a gown the color of deep amber. Jia had opinions about gown selection, and Jia's opinions were usually correct. She had not told Jia she was anticipating seeing Choi Hun. She had not entirely admitted this to herself either. She was attending for professional reasons. The 4 mirror checks before leaving were entirely coincidental. The gala was the intersection of money and medicine. The people who funded keeping other people alive gathered to congratulate themselves and build the contacts that generated more funding. Philippa moved through it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to be presentable in rooms she didn't belong to. She was accepting a glass of water from a passing server when she felt it. That particular shift in a room's attention. The way a social space reorganizes itself around someone it has collectively decided matters. She did not turn around immediately. She was aware of him before she saw him. The gravitational thing, the field. When she turned, he was across the ballroom in conversation with 3 men competing to say the most impressive thing, and he was not looking at them. He was looking at her. He had been looking at her since he walked in. She turned back to her water. Han Mi-rae appeared at her elbow 20 minutes later, impeccably presented. The cool confidence of a woman who had been beautiful and connected long enough that both had become tools rather than gifts. The daughter of one of BH Group's founding board members. Adjacent to Choi Hun for years, according to Jia's thorough social briefing, in that specific way of 2 people whose families had decided they suited each other and were waiting for the subjects to arrive at the same conclusion. You're the American nurse, Mi-rae said, in flawless, deliberately deployed English. The protocol presentation. Philippa Troy. Yes. Eyes professionally warm, functionally cold. Choi Hun mentioned your work, she said. He's very thorough in his assessments. Notices things other people miss. A fractional pause, and then he moves on to the next interesting problem. Philippa met her gaze. Thank you for letting me know, she said pleasantly. Mi-rae smiled. It did not reach her eyes. She moved away into the crowd. He found her on the edge of the dance floor 20 minutes later. Not suddenly, he materialized at her side with the quality of inevitable arrival that characterized everything about him, as though the space next to her had always been the destination and the rest of the room simply the route. Dance with me, he said. Not technically a question. She had begun to understand that with him very little was. That seems inadvisable, she said. Most things worth doing are. She had a list of reasons to say no. She was aware of all of them. She said, 1 dance. His hand found the small of her back. She had forgotten what it felt like to dance with someone who led well, not by force or the controlling grip of a man demonstrating authority, but by suggestion, by presence. The slight pressure of a hand that communicated here, now, this way, and trusted her body to follow. Her body followed without consulting her. They were too close. She was aware of this. Technically deniable as anything other than professional social engagement, but the specific quality of the closeness, his hand through the silk of her gown, the warmth of his chest near her shoulder, was not technical. "Mirai found you," he said. "She did." "What did she say?" "That you assess interesting problems and move on to the next one." She looked up at him. "I filed it under things I was already aware of." His hand shifted fractionally at her back. "You are not a problem I'm assessing," he said. "Then what am I?" A long moment. Music moving around them. Cameras somewhere doing what cameras did at events like this. "I don't have an answer for that yet," he said. "That is why I'm still here." The dance drew them toward the edge of the floor, toward the shadow of one of the marble columns lining the ballroom's perimeter. She wasn't certain which of them had steered there, or whether it had simply happened as a consequence of moving together. The column's shadow fell over them. He turned her, gently, so her back was partially toward the room. He looked at her face for a moment that lasted longer than a moment. Then he kissed her. Not like the elevator. That had been accident, brush, ghost. This was deliberate. His hand came to her jaw, the way it had in the elevator, but differently. Not to anchor her gaze, but to hold her still, while he did what he had been, she understood, planning since approximately March. The kiss was slow, possessive the way certainty is possessive. Not aggressive, not a demand, but a claim made without question. His mouth moved against hers with the patience of someone for whom anticipation had always been the most important part of anything. She kissed him back. She was trembling when he pulled back. Not fear, not panic, something entirely different and equally destabilizing. He looked at her in the shadow of the column, ballroom light at the edge of his face, his thumb moving once against her jaw before dropping. "Philippa," he said, just her name, in this dark, after that. She pressed her hand flat against his chest, his heartbeat under her palm, faster than his composure suggested, always faster. The most honest thing she had learned about him. "This is a very bad idea," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "I'm going to need time." "Take it," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She stepped back into the light. Behind her, she heard the faint sound of Mirai's champagne glass set down, with slightly more force than necessary. "Stay with me, because the story just got darker, and you need to know what happens next." Marcus Webb arrived in Seoul on a Thursday in August. Choi Hun knew before Philippa did. The alert came through at 6:14 a.m., 14 hours after the Atlanta flight departed. He had understood from the beginning this day would come. Men like Marcus Webb did not accept the permanent unavailability of things they considered theirs. They waited, watched, reappeared when the subject felt safe enough to have lowered her defenses. He called Tae-young immediately. "He's here." "Move the standing detail to active." "Already in motion," said Tae-young. "Do we tell her?" "Yes, but carefully. She needs the information. She doesn't need to feel managed." He called her directly. She answered on the third ring, voice carrying the particular alertness of someone mid-shift. "Choi Hun." She had started using his name rather than his title, approximately 3 weeks after the gala. He had not remarked on it, simply noted it, privately, as one of the small, irreversible things. "Are you sitting down?" he said. A pause. "No. Should I be?" "Marcus Webb is in Seoul." Silence. Then, "How do you know?" "I've had a monitor on his travel for several months. He boarded an Incheon-bound flight yesterday evening." More silence. This one had weight. "Philippa," his voice was careful, "I need you to listen to me and not react to the fact that you're reacting. Can you do that?" A long, slow breath. "Yes. There are 2 people near the hospital right now who I trust completely. They will not approach you, will not speak to you, but if anything happens, they'll be there in under 90 seconds. You're telling me this because you gave me your word about consent." "Yes." Another silence. Then, with composure that cost more than it appeared to, "Okay." "Okay? I heard you." A pause. "Thank you for telling me." He wanted to say more, quite a lot more. Things he'd been categorizing and storing for weeks. Things that lived in the region of his chest that hadn't been particularly active before March and had become inconveniently busy since. He said none of them. "I'll see you tonight," he said. "Don't come to the hospital. I need to finish my shift like a normal person." "I know." A pause. "Philippa, be careful." "I've been careful my entire adult life," she said. "It's exhausting." He almost smiled. "I know that too." It happened at 10:47 p.m. Hospital parking structure, level 3, near the elevator bank. She had not deviated from her routine. Not enough warning to arrange anything different without it looking like a deviation, which Marcus would recognize, which would tell him something she did not want him to know. She was walking toward her car when she heard Phil, full body flinch, involuntary, humiliating, honest. She turned. Marcus Webb stood 6 feet away in the fluorescent ugly light, looking almost exactly as she remembered. Well-dressed, good-looking, in a way that had once meant something, and now meant nothing except he knows it and uses it. Wearing the expression she remembered most, simultaneously hurt and entitled. "How could you make me do this?" "You look good," he said. She did not respond. "Soul," he said. "That's dramatic, Phil. Running to Soul. Don't call me that. I just want to talk." A step forward. "I've been trying to reach you for over a year. You blocked me everywhere. I flew across the world. That was your choice." She stepped back, toward the elevator. "I have a restraining order, Marcus. That's not valid here. The spirit of it is. You need to leave. I just need 5 minutes. You need to leave. Now." He moved faster than she expected. They always moved faster than you expected. That was the thing no one told you. The gap between knowing it might happen and it happening. And he was in front of her, close enough that the smell of him hit her, and her nervous system went immediately, catastrophically offline. "Phil, that's enough." The voice came from behind Marcus. He turned. Baek Choi-hoon stood at the entrance to the parking level. Not alone. 2 men flanked him with the particular stillness of people very good at a specific kind of work. His expression was the calmest she had ever seen it. That was somehow the most frightening version of it. "You're going to step away from her," he said to Marcus, quietly. He didn't need volume for this. "And then you're going to leave this building, and then you're going to leave this city." Marcus looked at him. The entitled hurt still there, but something shifting behind it. The recalibration of someone encountering a situation his particular brand of control was not designed to navigate. "Who are you?" he said. Choi-hun looked at him with the specific quality of absolute zero. "The person giving you a choice," he said. What followed was very fast and somewhat blurred, and ended with Marcus on the ground, and blood on Choi-hun's hands, and the 2 flanking men on phones, managing consequences in the particular register of people doing this on behalf of someone else. Philippa stood very still. The parking structure was very quiet. Marcus was taken away, by people she didn't know, in a manner she didn't ask about. She stood in the parking structure and looked at Choi-hun. He looked back at her. His hands, those careful, certain hands, not entirely clean. The blood on his hands was minimal and not his. This did not, particularly, make her feel better about it. They were in the back seat of his car. She didn't remember getting in. It had simply happened. And he was very still beside her, facing forward, waiting. She looked at his hands. She reached over and touched his face. She didn't plan to. Some direct line between crisis and contact that bypassed conscious decision entirely. Her fingers cupped his jaw. She turned his face toward her. She needed to see that he was there, real, present. His eyes, when they met hers, were the most unguarded she had ever seen them. "You should be afraid of me now," he said. A warning delivered quietly, as though giving her information she needed, rather than asking her to use it. She looked at him. "I think I always was," she said. And then she kissed him. Not like the gala, that had been him, deliberate and patient. This was her, desperate and shaking and driven by something that had nothing to do with strategy, and everything to do with, he is real and I am real, and we are both still here. He made a sound, low, involuntary, nothing of the boardroom in it, and his arms came around her, and he lifted her fractionally, pressing her close, and for a moment, she felt his composure break. the absolute control fracturing along the lines where real feeling lived. What was underneath was not cold and calculating. What was underneath was wanting, pure, uncomplicated, enormous. When they separated, she was pressed into the corner of the seat, and he was breathing harder than she had ever seen him breathe, and they looked at each other in the moving dark. "He'll be on a flight home by morning," Choi-hun said. "He won't come back." "What did you do to him?" A pause. Offered him a compelling alternative to staying. Choi-hun. "He won't be charged, won't be harmed. He'll be a beat, relocated to a context where approaching you is not convenient." He looked at her steadily. "I need you to understand that I'm aware this sits in a gray area. A gray area. A significant gray area." She looked out the window. Seoul, indifferent and enormous. He was going to... Yes, he's done it before. The police didn't... I know. The police were not the right tool for this particular problem. She thought about the years of restraining orders and violation reports and civil matters. The grinding institutional failure of every official system she'd tried to use to keep herself safe. She thought about the look in Marcus's eyes when he turned and saw Choi-hun standing there. The recalibration. The recognition that he had finally run into something he could not manage. She did not say, "What you did was right." She said, "I need some time to process this." "Take it," he said. "Real space. Not you appearing in places where I happen to be." Something crossed his face. She watched him receive it. "Yes," he said. "All right." The car pulled up to her building. She got out, paused. "Turn back, Choi-hun." He looked at her through the window. "Thank you," she said, "for being there, even though..." She stopped. "Thank you." She went inside. She sat on her apartment floor for a long time, because the floor felt stable, and floors required nothing from her. And she let herself feel all of it. The fear, the relief, the dizzy, complicated sensation of being cared for by someone who operated outside every boundary she'd built to keep herself safe. And the terrible, inconvenient, absolutely unwelcome fact that she was, despite every warning sign and gray area and complication, falling. She pulled back. She told herself it was about processing. She told Dr. Yoon she was giving herself appropriate distance to evaluate her feelings with clarity, which Dr. Yoon received with the expression of someone professionally committed to not rolling their eyes. "You're afraid," Dr. Yoon said. "Yes. Of him, of how much I want to stop being afraid of him." 3 weeks passed. No contact beyond professional necessity. He kept his word. No appearances at the hospital, no messages, the precise, respectful distance she had requested. It was the most disciplined she had ever seen him, which was somehow the most maddening version of him, because she thought about him more in his absence than she had in his presence. Then a second industry event came through, a smaller private dinner, senior hospital personnel and key investors. Philippa's attendance logged as professional, required. She had decided in the cab that she was perfectly composed. She lasted 22 minutes. The venue was a private rooftop restaurant in Gangnam-gu. Glass walls on 3 sides. Seoul glittering below. She moved through conversations. Administrators, investors, across the room making faces at her when no one was looking. And found, as she always eventually found, that her awareness of the room rearranged itself around where he was standing. He was across the space in conversation with a man she didn't recognize, dark suit, that unhurried quality of attention focused entirely on whoever he was speaking to. He had not looked at her. He did not appear to know she was there. She knew this was not true. She stepped onto the narrow outdoor terrace. Glass barrier, Seoul below, cold October air. She needed 2 minutes of actual quiet before she could continue being professionally functional. She got approximately 45 seconds. "You're cold," he said, from directly behind her. She didn't turn around. "I'm fine. You're shivering." "I'm not." She stopped, because she was, slightly, and she hadn't noticed until he said it, and that was somehow the most irritating thing. "I needed air." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, not touching, just present. Below them, Seoul conducted itself with magnificent indifference. 10,000 lights and 10,000 stories, none of them concerning the two of them standing at the edge of a rooftop in October. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm doing the work," she said. "Dr. Yoon says I'm making real progress." which is therapists speak for, I am no longer lying to myself about what I feel, which apparently counts as an achievement. A beat of quiet. What do you feel? He asked. She looked at him. He was watching her with that quality of attention she had never fully adjusted to, not aggressive or overwhelming, but so completely present. Not thinking about something else, not planning his next sentence. Simply here, that I am not ready, she said carefully, for what I think this is. And what do you think it is? She didn't answer. She looked back at the city. After a moment, he turned as well. They stood side by side, cold air between them, the warmth of his arm near hers, the particular charged quality of proximity that neither of them was pretending didn't exist. I've been thinking about the elevator, she said. He said nothing, waiting, not the kiss. A pause, before that, the breathing, the way you placed yourself in my line of sight and waited. You didn't try to fix it, didn't tell me I was fine. You gave me something to focus on and trusted me to do the rest. She looked at her hands on the railing. No one has ever done that for me. Philippa, I'm saying it because you should know, she said. Because I've been treating you like the threat, and you keep being not that, and I haven't acknowledged that. He was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, I am a threat. I know. I have done things that would horrify you. Some of them I already know about. Not all of them. I know. She held his gaze. And I'm still standing here. He moved first, just a fraction, his shoulder turning toward her, and the gap between them became something smaller than air. His hand came up slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with a care so deliberate it made her breath go ragged. Not the clinical jaw hold of the elevator, not the claiming certainty of the gala, but something quieter than both. Something that had patience in it, and, underneath, something barely contained. She felt it the way you feel a tide. Not by the movement, but by the pull. If you let me close again, he said, I will not be able to maintain what I've been maintaining. The honesty of it, unguarded, deliberate, from a man who kept everything behind glass, landed somewhere deep. What does that mean? She asked. It means I have been respecting your distance because you asked for it, and that has been the most difficult thing I have done in recent memory. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, once, exactly once, the way it had in the elevator, and his voice dropped to just above a whisper. I want more than distance. She felt the warmth radiating off him against the cold air. The city below. She pressed her hand flat against his chest, his heartbeat under her palm, faster than his composure. Always faster. I know, she said. She kissed him, brief, deliberate, eyes open. He responded with the quality of someone who had been holding something back for a long time and was now releasing exactly the amount he had decided to, which was not all of it, she understood, which was restrained and careful and still the most overwhelming thing she had experienced. His arms came around her, and she felt his warmth solid against the cold air, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Then she pulled back. Her forehead dropped to his collarbone. He held her there, one hand flat against her back. I can't do this yet, she said. I'm not there yet. I know, he said against the top of her head. I want to be. I know that too. She looked up at him. His jaw was tight with the effort of restraint, visible now, not perfectly managed. She saw it. Felt, despite everything, the particular terrible tenderness of watching someone choose to give you what you need rather than take what they want. Soon, she said. He held her gaze. I'm not going anywhere, he said. She believed him. She stepped back into the warmth of the restaurant. He gave her 30 seconds, then followed, and they spent the rest of the evening on opposite sides of the room. The distance between them was the most specific distance she had ever felt. Not cold, not absent. Deliberate and full and aching in every direction. Gia caught her eye from across the room. Raised an eyebrow. Philippa gave her nothing. But in the cab home, she pressed her hand against her collarbone where she could still feel the ghost of his heartbeat. She thought, he felt like a hunger that didn't understand satisfaction. Then she thought, I think that's exactly why I can't walk away. Dr. Yoon would tell her the following Tuesday, you didn't lose yourself, you stayed present, and still chose yourself. That's entirely different from what you did with Marcus. Philippa sat with that, then said, he's going to be worth it. Dr. Yoon smiled. I think you already know the answer to that. The week before Mireille's move, The hospital ran a 3-day crisis intake review. Administrative and clinical staff overlapping in the corridors more than usual. Everyone running slightly behind. Everyone managing slightly too much. Philippa was exiting the East Wing file room with a thick stack of updated protocol binders when she turned the corner and walked directly into Choi Hun. Not as dramatically as the first time in March. No collision. Just him, suddenly there, both of them adjusting, her binders angled awkwardly between them, his hand coming up instinctively to stabilize the stack before it could slide. His fingers closed over hers at the edge of the binder. For exactly 2 seconds they were both holding it. She looked up. He was already looking at her. That quality, present, studying, there. And then the barest shift at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The ghost of one. The acknowledgement of something neither of them was going to say in a hospital corridor. She took the binders back. "Thank you," she said. "Of course," he said. She walked away. She was aware of her own hands for the rest of the afternoon, the specific 2 inches of her fingers where the warmth of his had been. The way it lived there, small and persistent, like an ember that had no intention of going out. Hit subscribe because this next part is about to change everything, and you need to be here for it. Han Mi-rae made her move in September. Philippa arrived at the hospital on a Monday morning to find the break room unusually quiet, and Jia waiting with an expression she had never seen on her face before. The expression of someone who has been handed bad news and is measuring how to deliver it. "There's a story," Jia said. It was in 3 outlets, 2 Korean gossip-adjacent media sources, and 1 occupying the uncomfortable middle ground between legitimate medical journalism and scandal. The headline, translated and confirmed by Jia's increasingly grim expression, "Foreign nurse at BH Group Hospital, treated for ongoing mental condition. Is she safe to practice?" The article was not precise about her diagnosis. It didn't need to be. It referenced therapy attendance, cited sources close to the hospital, mentioned a history of emotional instability with the particular strategic vagueness that was legally defensible and socially devastating. The source was obvious. Only one person had the therapy schedule. Only one person had seen it documented. Philippa sat in the break room and read the article twice, felt, very specifically, each implication, the career damage, the professional scrutiny, the reduction of a condition she had worked years to manage into a tabloid detail. The exposure of something private and hard-won. She thought about a man who had looked at her surveillance file. She felt cold. "Phil," Jia said. "I know," Philippa said flatly. "I know. Who shared that? Are you sure? There's only one person who had it." She stood. "I need to think." She went to the roof. She stood at the edge and breathed and felt the specific betrayal of having trusted someone with the vulnerable parts and finding that trust had been accessed by someone who had weaponized it. Her phone rang. Choi Hun. She looked at it. She answered. "I know," he said, before she could speak. "Did you know?" Immediate. "Philippa, no. I did not share that information with anyone." She was quiet. "I believe you," she said. And it was the truth. And it also hurt that it was the truth, because it meant the information had been accessed by someone she hadn't given access to. Who? Mi-rae. No hesitation. She has access to certain administrative systems through her father's board position. Targeted breach. A pause. "I'm already—" "Don't," she said. "Don't what? Don't fix it before telling me you're fixing it. Don't manage this around me. What are you doing?" Another pause. She heard him recalibrate. Adjust, choose. "I have documentation of Mi-rae's access to the breach source," he said. Documentation of her father's 3-year embezzlement scheme within BH Group's subsidiary finances. Documentation of a systematic information breach campaign against at least 4 other staff members over 2 years. He stopped. "I'm asking whether I have your support to release it." She stood on the roof with the city below and his voice in her ear. "Tell me this will actually help," she said. "Not just punish. It will expose a corrupt system. What happens after that is what usually happens when systems are exposed." A pause. "It won't be clean. Nothing is," she breathed. "Do it. It will create a very significant public situation." "Choi Hun," she cut him off. "Do it." A moment of silence. "Yes," he said. What followed was, by Seoul's media corporate standards, genuinely spectacular. The release was staged through 3 legitimate journalistic channels over 48 hours, beginning with the embezzlement documentation and concluding with the full breach campaign record, with Philippa's case as the clearest and most recent example. The board member resigned within 24 hours. Mireille's legal team issued and retracted 2 statements in the same afternoon. The hospital's executive committee sent Philippa a formal letter of apology. Her colleagues, led by Jia, who had drafted a counter-petition and collected 47 signatures before Philippa finished her next shift, sent a second. Choi Hun had exposed and dismantled, in 48 hours, a corruption network embedded in his own corporate structure for 3 years. His shareholders were unhappy. His board was unsettled. His public reputation, built on the myth of strategic invincibility, had been complicated by the revelation that he had prioritized a nurse in his hospital's trauma wing over the stability of his own corporate ecosystem. He had done it anyway. Jia found Philippa in the break room on the 3rd day after the story broke. "He chose you," she said, not asking. Philippa looked at her coffee. "He chose what was right," she said. "Those were the same thing," Jia said. "And you know it." Philippa was quiet for a long time. "I know it," she agreed. She found him at the hospital late on a Thursday evening in October, in the office he still used during inspections. She closed the door behind her. He stood up from the desk. She had rehearsed this conversation for weeks, organized it into clear, structured language. She had a list of truths. A framework. She looked at him, and the framework dissolved. "I don't think you love me," she said. "I think you're addicted to needing me." He went still. "I think you found something you couldn't solve, and built a whole world around the fact that you couldn't solve it. I think you get bored of things you understand, and I was new and strange and resistant, and that was interesting. I think you've done genuinely good things because of me, but I don't know if you've done them for me. I don't know if you can see the difference." He listened. He did not interrupt. Did not correct. Did not deploy the controlled, articulate version of himself to systematically dismantle her argument. He just listened. When she stopped, he looked at her for a long moment. More open than she had ever seen him. Less managed. "You might be right," he said. She blinked. "I don't know with certainty whether what I feel is love as you would define it or as it should be defined. I know what I was before you, a man who found things interesting until he didn't and then left them behind." He paused. "I know that with you, I have not found the edge of interesting. I know that when I imagine leaving you behind..." He stopped. "I cannot complete that thought." One step toward her. Then he stopped. He gave her the space. "I know I compromised my company for your safety, and felt nothing except that it was obviously correct," he said. "I know I changed my surveillance protocols because you asked, and I would change anything you asked me to change. I know that is not the behavior of a man merely solving a puzzle." A pause. "But you're telling me something you've been building the courage to say for a long time, and you deserve better than my counter-argument." She looked at him. The office was quiet. Seoul hummed 14 floors below. "Tell me what you want," she said. "Not what you'll provide, not what you'll protect or manage or arrange. What do you want?" He held her gaze. "You," he said simply. "Present, whole. Yours first and mine after." Her breath was unsteady. "That's different from what you started with," she said. "Yes." He didn't look away. "You changed what I was capable of wanting." She could have walked away. The door was behind her, her coat on the chair by the door. She had planned to walk away after this conversation. Had told Dr. Yoon she was going to say the things that needed saying, and then give herself space to decide. She stood in the office and decided. She crossed the distance. She kissed him, and this time it was neither her desperation, nor his patience, nor the accident of proximity. It was a choice, made clearly, by both of them, simultaneously and without apology. He kissed her like he had been starving. Deep and certain and consuming the way a tide is consuming, not violent, not aggressive, but enormous and total and operating according to forces that had always existed long before either of them arrived. And then, the thing she would return to, the way you return to evidence of something true, he broke the kiss. Not because it wasn't what he wanted. Because it was everything he wanted, and he chose, deliberately and completely, to give her the moment back. He pressed his forehead against hers. He breathed. He held her face in his hands and breathed. Philippa, just her name, in this specific air, in the aftermath of a kiss that had rearranged something fundamental. She understood then, with the clarity that lives on the other side of the last wall coming down, what he had been and what he was becoming, and that these were not the same thing. That love was not what she had survived with Marcus. Control wearing love's language. That love was this, a man choosing restraint at the exact moment he wanted nothing of the kind. A man returning her to herself even when he had every opportunity to keep her. She leaned into his hands. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" His voice was rough at the edges. "Okay, I'm here. I'm choosing to be here." He exhaled. His arms came around her slowly, carefully, the way you hold something you know the value of. "We are almost at the end. Don't go anywhere. And if this story has moved you, subscribe and tell me in the comments. I want to know which moment stayed with you." The months that followed were not simple. Nothing about their lives was structured for simplicity. He was still a man whose empire ran on decisions that didn't always survive moral scrutiny. She was still a woman whose nervous system had been trained to anticipate threat in the presence of power. There were still days when her panic disorder made her the world's most reluctant person in enclosed spaces, and still evenings when his phone rang and his face went closed and professional, and she had to choose, actively, not to interpret his distance as danger. But choosing was the point. She started a small group at the hospital, initially informal, eventually structured, eventually official, for medical staff struggling with mental health challenges in a profession that systematically glorified their suppression. Gia co-led it. Within 6 months, 43 staff members had attended at least one session. The local Korean Medical Association reached out, then a national mental health organization, then 3 international journals. Philippa Troy, trauma nurse, who had crossed an ocean to survive herself, became, by some non-linear accumulation of choices, one of the clearest voices in Korean medicine, advocating for the people doing the most invisible emotional labor. She told Dr. Yoon, during a December session, that she thought she finally understood what rebuilt felt like. Not fixed. She didn't believe in fixed, the way she didn't believe a bone was fixed after a break. Only healed in a way that acknowledged the break had happened. But rebuilt. Functional and real and hers. And him? Dr. Yoon asked. Philippa considered. "He's still the most complicated person I've ever met," she said. "Still capable of things I have to negotiate with myself about. But she paused. "He sees me, not the nurse, not the problem he can't solve. He sees me." "That sounds like what you needed most." "It sounds like what I was most afraid to need," Philippa corrected. Dr. Yoon smiled. "Sometimes those are the same thing." Choi Hoon reformed parts of BH Group in ways his board found inconvenient, and his competitors found bewildering. Transparency protocols for hospital acquisitions, an independent ethics board with actual investigative authority, 3 contracts terminated that his legal team had called commercially advantageous, and his own review found exploitative. He did not exit the Mafia-adjacent strategic work entirely. This was the part that did not become clean and simple. The part Philippa knew about and had decided, in the way adults make complicated decisions, she could live with more honestly than she could live with pretending it wasn't there. The danger still existed. She knew this. But the danger no longer felt like the whole story. Tae-young, watching his employer's evolution from his customary 3 steps behind, said nothing for several months. Then one evening, over the expensive whiskey that had hosted the original conversation about the Choi Hoon problem, he raised his glass. "Well," he said. Choi Hoon raised his. "Well," he agreed. It was November, a quiet Tuesday evening. Seoul in autumn. The amber and copper of Bukhansan visible from the hospital rooftop where Philippa stood at the end of her shift. The city spread below in its enormity, conducting itself with its usual magnificent indifference. She heard the service door behind her. She did not turn around. She felt him arrive at the railing beside her. That field, that gravity, that specific warmth she had spent 8 months trying not to feel, and the subsequent months learning to feel, without losing herself in it. They stood together in the November evening and looked at the city. After a while, she turned her head and rested her cheek against his shoulder. His arm came around her. "Long shift?" he said. "They're all long shifts." "Yes." A pause. "Do you want to eat? I know a—" "In a minute," she said. She closed her eyes. His chin came to rest against the top of her head. And in the particular quiet of a Soul Tuesday in November, on a hospital rooftop with the city's amber lights spreading in every direction, she pressed her lips softly against the fabric of his shoulder and said, against the warmth of him, "You were right." She felt him go still. "About what?" he asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "I can't handle you," she said. A pause. "Philippa, I've tried," she said. "For 8 months I tried to handle you, the way I handle everything, at arm's length, with protocols, with careful emotional management, and strategic distance." She paused. "I can't." He was quiet for a moment. Then she felt him smile against the top of her head. Not the controlled half-smile of the corridor. Not the boardroom expression. The real one. Younger. Less guarded. Moving over his face like sunlight through a crack in something that had been closed a very long time. "You were never meant to," he said. She lifted her head and looked at him. He looked back at her. The city continued below, enormous and indifferent, and full of its own private fires. The November air cold and clear, and between them, something that had begun in a corridor, with a wrist in the dark, and a voice like gravity, and had survived its own complications, to become something entirely different. Something that had no better name than the one that was simplest, most obvious, and most terrifying. "I know," she said. He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes. The city burned gold below them, and the fire, that first corridor fire, the one that started with one wrist in the dark and one thumb on a pulse point, never once cooled. It had only learned to live alongside everything else, alongside her healing and his restraint, alongside the complicated truths they had chosen not to look away from, alongside the ordinary, extraordinary Tuesday evenings of two people who had each, against all probability, found the one thing they hadn't known they were looking for. The danger still existed. The attraction never softened. It never would. That was the whole point. And that, finally, is the story of Philippa Troy and Baek Choi-hoon, the woman who crossed an ocean to survive herself, and the man who had everything except the one thing his money could not purchase, someone who refused to be solved. She found stability in the last place she had looked, not in distance, not in control, not in the careful management of everything that could hurt her, but in the choosing, the daily, deliberate, complicated choice to remain present in a life that was not simple and a love that was not safe, but was, undeniably and entirely, real. And he found the only satisfaction he had ever encountered that did not become boredom, a woman who kept becoming, kept growing, kept surprising him, not because she was a puzzle, but because she was a person. And persons, in all their complexity and survival and fire, are inexhaustible. The danger still exists. The attraction never softened. But between danger and desire, they built something neither of them expected, a home. If this story stayed with you, if Philippa's strength or Choi-hoon's evolution, or even just that cold open in the corridor lived in your head, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me which moment moved you most. Was it the cold open, the elevator, the gala kiss, the rooftop in October when they almost crossed the line and chose not to, the file room corridor, 2 seconds, 2 hands, 1 ember, the final argument? Tell me. Share this with someone who needs a story that takes both danger and healing seriously. I'll see you in the next one.